The disguised millionaire couldn't believe what he saw when he read the small note that the 7-year-old waitress handed him. Her innocent words touched him so deeply that he began to cry right there in the restaurant. Before we dive into the story, leave a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Michael Thompson adjusted the worn baseball cap lower over his eyes, the rough fabric against his perfectly manicured fingers. The 30-year-old tech mogul had traded his usual $1,000 suits for a faded flannel shirt and jeans with real holes, not the designer kind that cost more than most people's monthly salary. Standing outside Wilson's restaurant in the downtown area of the small town of Willowbrook, Ohio, he felt like an actor preparing for the role of his life. For 3 years, his assistant had handled all human interactions. The elevator in his penthouse opened directly into his office. His meals arrived via private chef. His dates were pre-selected by matchmaking services that charged 6 figures. He realized with frightening clarity that he hadn't had a genuine conversation with an ordinary person he couldn't even remember when. The idea had arisen during yet another sleepless night in his Manhattan tower, surrounded by awards and newspaper clippings declaring him America's most eligible bachelor and tech's golden boy. But what did it all mean if he felt empty? If every smile directed at him carried a price tag? So here he was, in a town where his company's logo wasn't plastered on every billboard, where his face hadn't appeared on magazine covers, where his name meant nothing. He had driven 12 hours in a rented Honda Civic, the most common car he could find, to become nobody, just Michael. Not Michael Thompson, CEO of Thompson Innovations. Not Michael Thompson worth $847 million. Simply Michael. The restaurant door's bell chimed when he entered. The sound was warm and welcoming. The smell of fresh coffee and homemade pie immediately enveloped him. Checkered tablecloths, vinyl booths patched with duct tape, and a counter that had witnessed decades of conversations. Everything his sterile world wasn't. "Sit anywhere you like, hun," shouted a tired voice from behind the counter. A woman in her 40s, thin and pale, managed a weary smile while cleaning glasses with hands that trembled slightly. But it wasn't the woman who caught Michael's attention. It was the small figure weaving between tables with a grace that seemed impossible for someone so young. Golden curls bounced as she moved, and despite the oversized apron that almost dragged on the floor, she carried herself with surprising confidence. She couldn't be more than 7 years old. The girl approached his booth with eyes that sparkled like morning sunlight. "Hi, I'm Emma. What can I serve you today?" Her voice carried a sweetness that made Michael's chest tighten unexpectedly. Michael paused, remembering his role. "Just coffee for now, please." "Coming right up." Emma smiled radiantly, her smile so genuine it almost hurt to witness. "Mom makes the best coffee in all of Ohio. You'll see." As Emma hurried away, Michael watched her interact with other customers. She knew everyone's names, asked about grandchildren, remembered who liked their eggs over easy. This child, who should be playing with dolls or watching cartoons, was working with a dedication that put his own employees to shame. When she returned with his coffee, the cup clinked slightly in her small hands, but her smile never wavered. "There you go, sir. Would you like some of Mom's famous apple pie? It's still warm." Something in her eagerness, her desperate hope for a sale, made Michael's throat tighten. "Yes," he managed to say. "That sounds perfect." For the next hour, he watched Emma work. She never complained, never showed frustration when customers ignored her or spoke rudely. She simply continued serving with that radiant smile, her small legs carrying her tirelessly through the restaurant. When Michael finally asked for the check, Emma approached with something hidden behind her back. "Here you go, sir," she said, placing the bill on the table. Then, with a conspiratorial whisper, she added, "And this is for you." She slid a small piece of paper next to his cup and hurried away before he could respond. Michael's hands trembled as he unfolded the note. In careful, childish handwriting, Emma had written, "Thank you for being kind to me today. Most adults don't really see me. You looked at me like I mattered. That made my heart happy. I hope your heart is happy too, Emma." The words blurred as tears he hadn't shed in years began to fall. In his world of calculated interactions and strategic relationships, a 7-year-old girl working in a small-town restaurant had just shown him what he had lost, what he had never really had. And as Emma waved goodbye from across the restaurant, Michael Thompson realized that everything he thought he knew about life was about to change forever. Michael couldn't force himself to leave Wilson's. Something about Emma's note had broken a wall inside him that he didn't even know existed. He carefully folded the precious piece of paper and placed it in his wallet, right behind his black American Express card, 2 pieces of paper representing completely different worlds. He ordered another cup of coffee, then another piece of pie, watching this extraordinary child navigate a world that seemed too heavy for her tiny shoulders. Emma moved through the restaurant like a seasoned professional, but Michael began to notice things that made his chest tighten with concern. During the dinner rush, Emma's movements became more frantic. Her small hands struggled with heavy plates, the ceramic dishes looking enormous in her grasp. Twice he saw her wince when lifting the coffee pot, her thin arms trembling with the weight. She almost dropped a tray of dishes when a customer barked impatiently at her, but she simply smiled and apologized as if the rudeness were her fault. The other waitress, Emma's mother, he realized, moved even more slowly than before. Linda Wilson was clearly ill, pausing frequently to catch her breath and leaning against tables. Her skin had an ashen pallor, and Michael noticed how she pressed her hand against her chest when she thought no one was looking. "Mom, you should sit down," Emma whispered during a brief lull, gently tugging her mother's apron with genuine concern in her voice. "Can't afford to, baby girl," came the tired reply. Linda's voice carried the weight of someone fighting battles on multiple fronts. "Bills don't pay themselves, and we're already behind on everything." Michael watched Emma's face fall slightly before forcing her smile back into place. This child was carrying burdens that would crush most adults. Yet she continued serving customers with grace and kindness that seemed to flow from some inexhaustible spring of hope. When a businessman in the corner booth snapped his fingers at Emma and demanded his check sometime today, Michael felt his hands clench into fists. Emma simply hurried over with an apology, never losing her composure even when the man didn't bother to look up from his phone while she spoke. During the evening crowd, Michael overheard fragments of conversations that painted a disturbing picture. References to unpaid medical bills, worried whispers about foreclosure notices, and the constant undercurrent of financial desperation that seemed to permeate every aspect of the Wilson family's life. When the evening crowd finally thinned, Michael approached the counter where Emma was counting the day's tips with the seriousness of a bank manager. Her small fingers carefully organized crumpled bills and scattered coins, mostly 1s and 5s, with a few quarters mixed in. The total couldn't have been more than $30. "Emma," he said softly, not wanting to startle her, "can I ask you something?" She looked up with those bright eyes, and Michael noticed the dark circles underneath them, evidence of sleepless nights and adult worries. "Sure. Are you staying in town? Most people just pass through here on their way to bigger places." Maybe for a few days. I was wondering, do you enjoy working here?" Emma's smile faltered for just a moment, revealing a glimpse of exhaustion and sadness before returning full force. "Oh yes, Mom and Dad need my help. Dad is really sick, and Mom gets tired easily now," the doctor said. She paused as if remembering she shouldn't share adult concerns with strangers. "Anyway, I'm good at helping. Mom says I'm her little angel." "I'm sure you are," Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're probably the best helper I've ever seen." Emma beamed at the praise, but Michael noticed how she unconsciously rubbed her small feet and how her shoulders curved when she thought no one was looking. Her little hands showed small cuts from handling dishes, and there was a maturity in her eyes that spoke of experiences no 7-year-old should have. As he walked back to his motel that night, Emma's note burned in his pocket like a secret flame. The neon sign flickered over the Willowbrook Motor Inn parking lot, and Michael realized that for the first time in years, He had a purpose that had nothing to do with profit margins, market dominance, or board meetings. Sitting in his sparse motel room, surrounded by simple furniture that represented everything his penthouse wasn't, Michael Thompson looked at his reflection in the darkened window. Tomorrow, he would begin figuring out how to help Emma and her family, but he had no idea how helping a 7-year-old girl could become so complicated. Michael stared at his laptop screen in the cramped motel room. Emma's note was spread beside the keyboard like a sacred document. The contrast was stark. His top-of-the-line MacBook Pro displaying complicated financial spreadsheets next to a piece of paper that contained more genuine emotion than all the business contracts he'd ever signed. His first instinct had been simple: write a check, problem solved. In his world, money fixed everything: hostile takeovers, patent disputes, regulatory challenges, all obstacles that fell before the power of his financial resources. But how could someone, dressed in thrift store clothes and driving a rented Honda Civic, explain unexpected money without raising suspicion? He had spent hours researching the Wilson family online, using resources that would have impressed corporate intelligence agencies. Robert Wilson, 34, former factory supervisor at Willowbrook Manufacturing. Diagnosed with early-onset Parkinson's disease 2 years ago, just 6 months before the factory closure that devastated the local economy. Linda Wilson, 32, former elementary school teacher turned part-time seamstress when her own mysterious illness, something doctors couldn't definitively diagnose, began affecting her mobility and energy. The medical bills were staggering. Michael had seen corporate legal fees that were smaller than what the Wilson family owed to various specialists, hospitals, and pharmacies. Even with their modest insurance, co-pays and uncovered treatments had created a mountain of debt that grew each month. The local newspaper's website painted an even bleaker picture of Willowbrook itself. The main factory had employed over 800 people before closing. Unemployment had tripled. Small businesses were failing at an alarming rate, leaving empty storefronts throughout the downtown area. Wilson's was one of the few remaining family establishments, probably representing the family's last hope of staying financially afloat. Michael had built a business empire solving complex problems. But this seemed impossible. Every solution led to more complications. Anonymous donations would be investigated by local authorities suspicious of money laundering. Mysterious benefactors didn't exist in small towns without everyone knowing their business within hours. And if his true identity were discovered, everything would change. Emma would never look at him the same way again. Her genuine affection would be replaced by the calculated responses he was used to receiving. He called his assistant on his encrypted phone. "Marcus, I need you to research charitable foundations that help families with medical expenses, specifically in Ohio, and I need it done discreetly." "Sir, is everything all right? You've been gone for 3 days with no scheduled meetings. The board is asking questions about your whereabouts. Tell the board I'm conducting field research on market conditions in rural America. It's not entirely a lie." Michael looked at Emma's note again. "Sometimes the most important business happens far from boardroom. Should I prepare any documentation for tax purposes regarding charitable contributions?" "Not yet. I'm still assessing the situation." Michael paused, realizing how his corporate language sounded sterile when discussing Emma's family. "Marcus, have you ever met someone who changed how you see everything?" There was a long pause. "Sir, are you feeling well? You sound different." "I'm fine, just different." Michael touched Emma's note gently. "Sometimes different is exactly what we need." But when he hung up, an uneasy feeling settled in his stomach. In his experience, the most significant problems were always the most complicated to solve. The deals that mattered most were those where emotions got involved, and emotions made everything unpredictable. The next morning, he returned to the restaurant with a plan that felt fragile and dangerous. He had identified 3 potential approaches: anonymous donation through a regional foundation, creating a fake contest that the family could win, or somehow manufacturing a situation where he could reveal himself gradually and naturally. Each option carried significant risks. One wrong move, and he could destroy the very thing he was trying to protect, the pure and genuine connection he had found with Emma and her family. Emma greeted him like an old friend, and Michael realized he was entering emotional territory he had never navigated before. "Dad had another bad night," Emma confided to Michael during the morning lull, her voice barely above a whisper. She was refilling salt shakers with the focused concentration of a surgeon, but he could see worry etched into her young features like lines on an adult's face. Michael set down his coffee cup carefully. "I'm sorry to hear that, sweetheart. Is there anything that helps him feel better?" Emma's small hands stopped, and she looked around to make sure no other customers could hear. "The doctors say there's a new medicine that can slow down the shaking and help him think clearer. It's called..." She frowned, trying to remember the complex medical term. "Carbidopa Leo something." But she glanced toward the kitchen where her mother was preparing lunch with movements that seemed more labored than the day before. But what, sweetheart? It costs more than we make in 6 months. Mom did the math on the calculator 3 times, and she cried each time." Emma's voice carried the weight of adult resignation that no child should bear. "She doesn't know I saw her crying, but I did." Michael felt his chest tighten painfully. In his world, expensive treatments were simply line items on insurance claims. What about insurance? Doesn't it cover any of this? Emma shook her head, golden curls swaying sadly. "Dad lost his job when he got too sick to work safely around the big machines. The company said they were sorry, but they couldn't keep someone who might get hurt." She continued organizing salt shakers with mechanical precision. "When he lost his job, we lost the good insurance too. Now we have the cheap kind that doesn't cover much. Mom says we just have to pray harder and keep working as hard as we can." Before Michael could respond, the restaurant bell chimed and a man in an expensive charcoal suit entered. Unlike the usual customers in work clothes, flannel shirts, and casual wear, this newcomer surveyed the restaurant with the calculating eyes of someone conducting business. His leather briefcase and perfectly polished shoes marked him as an outsider in this humble establishment. "Mrs. Wilson." The man approached Linda with official-looking paperwork in his manicured hand. "I'm Richard Chen from First National Bank. We need to discuss your payment schedule immediately." Michael watched Linda's face lose color, her hands gripping a coffee pot so tight her knuckles went white. Emma instinctively moved closer to her mother, small hands clenched into protective fists despite her size. "Mr. Chen, please." Linda's voice trembled like autumn leaves. "Give me just 2 more weeks. The weekend crowd has been better than expected, and we're planning a Valentine's Day special menu that should bring in extra income. I have the numbers right here. Mrs. Wilson, you've requested extensions 4 times in the past 6 months. The bank has been more than patient considering your circumstances." Chen's voice wasn't particularly unkind, but carried the finality of someone who had delivered similar news many times before. "If we don't receive the full past due amount by this Friday, we'll have no choice but to begin foreclosure proceedings on both the restaurant and your home." "Foreclosure?" Emma's voice was small and confused, but Michael could see fear seeping into her young eyes as she recognized the gravity in the adult's tones. Linda knelt beside her daughter, hands shaking as she tried to maintain composure. "It's okay, baby girl. Mommy will figure it out." "She always does, doesn't she?" But Michael could see the terror in Linda's eyes, the look of someone who had exhausted options and was staring into an abyss. The woman was clearly ill too, probably dealing with her own medical issues while trying to care for her husband and keep their business afloat. After Chen left, his business card lying on the counter like a funeral announcement, the restaurant fell silent, except for the soft sound of Linda crying in the kitchen. She had retreated there to hide her breakdown from customers, but her muffled sobs carried through the service window. Emma stood in the middle of the restaurant, her usual brightness completely extinguished. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she stared at the spot where the banker had delivered his ultimatum. For the first time since Michael had known her, Emma looked exactly like what she was, a 7-year-old child terrified of losing everything she had ever known. Michael's mind raced through possibilities, calculations, solutions. He had enough money in his personal checking account to solve this family's problems 100 times over. The amount the bank was demanding wouldn't even register as a significant expense in his monthly budget. But every scenario ended the same way. His cover blown, his genuine connection with Emma transformed into something artificial and complicated. As he watched Emma quietly clear tables with tears streaming down her face, trying to maintain the routine that kept her family's world spinning, Michael realized he was facing the most important decision of his life, and he had less than 4 days to figure out how to save a family without destroying what made them special. Michael's hands trembled as he filled out the cashier's check at Willowbrook Small Bank, the pen feeling unusually heavy in his grip. $25,000, enough to save the Wilson family's restaurant, cover several months of medical expenses for Robert, and provide a small buffer for unexpected costs. His plan was elegant in its simplicity. Leave the check with an anonymous note claiming it was from a grateful customer who had been touched by the family's kindness and wished to remain unnamed. "That's quite a large amount for our little town," commented Mrs. Henderson, the elderly bank teller, peering over her glasses with the curiosity of someone who had processed Willowbrook residents' financial transactions for over 30 years. "You sure all these numbers are right, honey? Don't want any mistakes with money like this. I've seen people get into trouble over much smaller amounts." "It's correct," Michael assured her, though his palms were sweating despite the cool morning air. "And please, this needs to stay absolutely confidential. Banking regulations and all." Mrs. Henderson nodded knowingly. "Oh, I understand completely. We get our share of folks who want to help quietly. Small towns like ours, sometimes the left hand shouldn't know what the right hand is doing, if you catch my meaning." But as Michael walked toward Wilson's, the sealed envelope containing the check burning like coal in his jacket pocket, he spotted Emma outside the bank building. She was returning from an errand for her mother, a small grocery bag clutched in her arms, and her golden curls catching the afternoon sunlight as she skipped down the sidewalk, humming a tune that sounded like a lullaby. "Michael," she called out, her face lighting up with the pure joy only children can express. "What are you doing at the bank? Are you opening an account here? Mom says Mr. Henderson's grandson runs it now, and he's much nicer than the old president who used to work there." Panic shot through Michael like lightning. His carefully rehearsed explanation crumbled before he could even attempt it. "Just taking care of some routine business." Emma's naturally curious eyes, bright with intelligence that seemed far beyond her years, noticed the official-looking envelope in his hand. Her expression shifted from casual interest to something more focused. "Is it for Mom? Did you talk to Mr. Chen about the bank stuff? He made Mom cry yesterday, and I don't like people who make my mom cry." Michael's carefully planned story disintegrated under her innocent but penetrating gaze. This child who had shown him such pure trust deserved honesty, but the truth would fundamentally change everything between them. The genuine friendship they had developed would be forever altered by the revelation of his wealth. "Are you rich?" The question came out of nowhere, catching Michael completely off guard and nearly making him drop the envelope. "What? Why would you ask something like that?" Emma stepped closer, studying his face with the mysterious perception that only children possess when they sense something important. "Lots of little things. Your hands are too soft for someone who does hard work like Dad used to do. Your teeth are too straight and white. Mom says good dental work costs more than our car." She paused, her small brow furrowed in deep thought. "And yesterday you left a $50 tip for a $10 meal and didn't even seem to notice," she continued. "Plus, Mom told me that sometimes rich people pretend to be regular people to see how we treat them. She said it happened to her cousin once in Louisville." Michael felt the world tilt beneath his feet like a ship in rough seas. This 7-year-old child had seen through his carefully constructed disguise when trained business executives, investigative reporters, and corporate rivals never had. Her childlike honesty had cut through layers of deception that had cost him thousands of dollars to create. "Emma, let me explain. Are you here to help us?" Her voice was small and vulnerable, but full of desperate hope that broke his heart into pieces. "Because if you are, I need to tell you that we're in really, really big trouble. Bigger than Mom knows." "I understand." Michael knelt to her level on the sidewalk, the heavy envelope in his hands, as if it contained more than money, as if it held the power to change everything. Everything he had planned, every careful strategy, every contingency he had considered, dissolved before Emma's direct question and the trust shining in her young eyes. "Yes," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I want to help you more than I've ever wanted anything in my entire life." Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. Not her usual bright expression, but something deeper and more grateful. "I knew it. I prayed every night for someone to come help us. I asked God to send someone who would care about Mom and Dad and make the scary men stop coming to our house with papers." She threw her small arms around his neck with desperate relief. "But I never thought it would be someone who would be my friend first." As Michael held this brave little girl on a sidewalk in small-town Ohio, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo and feeling her small heart beating against his chest, he realized that his carefully laid plan had just exploded spectacularly. Emma knew his secret, which meant everything would change. The dynamic with her family, the complexity of providing help, the inevitable complications that would follow. But looking into her trusting eyes as she pulled back to smile at him, he wondered if maybe that wasn't such a terrible thing after all. "How long have you really known?" Michael asked, as he and Emma sat on the restaurant's front steps, sharing a piece of her mother's famous apple pie from a single plate. The cashier's check remained sealed in his pocket, but somehow it seemed less important now than the conversation unfolding between them. "Since yesterday, I think. But I wasn't completely sure until you got all nervous at the bank," Emma admitted, swinging her small legs from the step. "You got the same look Mom gets when she's trying to hide something important from me. Like when she pretends the electric bill isn't scary, or when she says Dad's medicine isn't that expensive." Michael took a deep breath, tasting the cinnamon and apples as he gathered courage for complete honesty. "Yes, I'm very, very rich, Emma. More money than your family could spend in several lifetimes. Rich like movie star rich, or rich like having your own airplane." Despite everything, Michael laughed, a genuine sound that surprised him. "Both. I have 3 airplanes, actually." Emma considered this information with the seriousness of a judge reviewing evidence. "Then why are you dressed like Mr. Peterson, who has the hardware store? His clothes look just like yours, but he drives that old truck with the squeaky brakes." "Because I wanted to know what it was like to be treated like a normal person instead of a walking wallet. In my real life, people are only nice to me because they want something. My money, my influence, my connections. I haven't had a genuine conversation in years." "That sounds really, really lonely," Emma said, with the direct compassion that only children can deliver without seeming condescending. "It's lonelier than you could imagine." Michael's voice failed as he realized he was sharing feelings he had never admitted even to himself. "Until I walked into your family's restaurant and met a 7-year-old girl who saw me as just another customer who needed coffee and kindness." Emma smiled, that same radiant expression that had first captured his heart, but now it carried deeper understanding. "You know what I think? I think you're exactly the same, Michael, whether you have money or not. You listen to me when other adults ignore kids. You asked about Dad and didn't change the subject when I talked about scary things. You looked at me like I was important." She paused, fork halfway to her mouth. "Money didn't make you do that. Your heart did." Michael looked at this extraordinary child, wondering how someone so young could possess such deep wisdom about human nature. "Emma, I brought something that could solve your family's immediate problems," he said carefully, pulling out the envelope. But if I help you the way I want to, everything will change. People will treat you differently when they find out you know someone with money. They might not trust your kindness anymore because they'll think it's connected to wealth. Some people will become your friend just to get close to me." Emma was quiet for a long moment, processing this adult complexity with the focused concentration she usually reserved for her restaurant tasks. "Will you still be my real friend if you help me? Not fake friend or business friend, but the kind who remembers my birthday and asks about my dreams?" "Always," Michael promised without hesitation, and he meant it more than any business contract he had ever signed. "And I don't care what other people think or do. Mom always says that real friends are the ones who stick around when things get scary and hard." She paused, then added with surprising insight that made Michael's breath catch, "Maybe this is your chance to find out who your real friends are too." As Emma spoke, Michael realized that this 7-year-old child had just solved a puzzle he had been struggling with for years. His fear wasn't really about helping her family. It was about discovering whether anyone in his carefully constructed adult life actually cared about him, beyond his bank account and business connections. "All right," he said, placing the envelope between them on the step. "But we do this together as real friends. That means honest conversations about everything, the good parts and the complicated parts." Emma's cry of joy echoed through the small town streets, causing several neighbors to peek from their windows with amused smiles. She threw her arms around Michael again, and for the first time in his adult life, he felt like he was exactly where he belonged. "There's just one thing," Emma said, pulling back with sudden seriousness. "We have to tell the truth to Mom and Dad. They taught me that lying is wrong, even when you're trying to help. They deserve to know who you really are before they accept your help." Michael nodded, though his stomach tightened with anxiety. "You're absolutely right. Do you think they'll understand?" Emma smiled with the confidence that only children possess when they believe completely in their parents. "Mom always says that miracles come in all different kinds of packages. I think she'll like your package." As the sun set over Willowbrook, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, neither Michael nor Emma realized that their journey was just beginning and that the real challenges were still to come. But for the first time in years, Michael Thompson wasn't afraid of what tomorrow might bring. The Wilson family's living room was smaller than Michael's closet, but it radiated more warmth than his entire Manhattan penthouse. Linda sat on the worn sofa, her arm supporting Robert as his hands trembled from Parkinson's. Emma perched between them, clutching Michael's sealed envelope like a sacred treasure. "Emma says you have something important to tell us," Linda said, her voice carrying the exhaustion of someone who had faced too many difficult conversations. "She also says you're not who you appear to be." Michael stood in the middle of the cramped space, feeling more nervous than he had ever been in any boardroom. "Mrs. Wilson, Mr. Wilson, my name is Michael Thompson. I'm the CEO and founder of Thompson Innovations." He paused, watching their faces for recognition. "I came to your town pretending to be someone else because I wanted to experience genuine human connection without the complications my wealth usually brings." Robert's eyes widened slightly. Even through his disease-clouded thinking, the name registered. "Thompson Innovations. You're that billionaire tech guy from the magazines, the one they call the Golden Boy." "I prefer just Michael," he said softly. "And I'm here because your daughter showed me something I had forgotten existed. Genuine kindness, without expectation of reward." Linda's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God, Emma, when you said he was rich, I thought maybe he owned a successful business or something, not—" She gestured helplessly at Michael. "Mom, he's still the same person who's been nice to us all week," Emma interrupted with wisdom far beyond her years. "Money doesn't change who someone is on the inside." Michael knelt in front of the family, putting himself at their eye level. "I know this is overwhelming. I know you have questions and probably concerns about my motivations, but I want you to know that everything I felt when I thought you saw me as just another customer, that was real. Your kindness, Emma's friendship, the way you welcomed me as a stranger, none of that was because of money you didn't know I had." "Why us?" Linda asked, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "Why our family?" Because Emma treated me like I mattered when she thought I had nothing to offer her. Because she gave me a note that reminded me what human decency looks like. Because watching your family fight so hard to stay together and stay positive despite impossible circumstances showed me what real strength is. Robert struggled to speak through his condition, his words slurred but determined. What do you want from us? Nothing, Michael replied immediately. I want to give. I want to help. I want to be part of something meaningful for the first time in my adult life. He looked at Emma, who nodded encouragingly. This envelope contains $25,000. It's enough to save the restaurant, cover your immediate medical expenses, and give you breathing room to plan for the future. The silence stretched for long minutes. Linda stared at the envelope as if it might disappear if she blinked. Robert's trembling hands reached for his wife's, and Emma watched her parents with the intense focus of a child trying to read adult emotions. This is too much, Linda finally whispered. We can't accept charity on this scale. It wouldn't be right. It's not charity, Michael said firmly. It's an investment in the only genuine friendship I've had in years. It's payment for lessons about humanity that no business school could teach. He paused, surprised by the emotion in his own voice. It's what friends do for each other when they have the means to help. Emma slipped from the sofa and took Michael's hand. See, Mom? He's not trying to buy us or change us. He just wants to help because he cares. Linda looked at her daughter, then at her struggling husband, then at the envelope that represented salvation. If we accept this, everything changes. People will talk. They'll treat us differently. They'll assume things. Let them talk, Robert managed to say, his voice gaining strength. Our daughter deserves better than watching her parents slowly lose everything while she works like an adult. Michael squeezed Emma's hand. I promise you, accepting my help won't change how I see your family or how I hope you see me, but it will change your daily stress, your options, and Emma's childhood. She'll get to be a 7-year-old instead of carrying the weight of adult responsibilities. Linda reached for the envelope with trembling hands. How do we even begin to thank you? You already have, Michael replied. You let a stranger into your lives and showed me what family really means. As Emma hugged both Michael and her parents simultaneously, creating a tangle of arms, tears, and laughter, Michael realized that giving money had never felt so meaningful before. But he also realized that his story was just beginning and that money, while solving some problems, often created entirely new ones. The news traveled through Willowbrook with the speed that only small-town gossip could achieve. By the time Michael returned to his motel that night, his phone was buzzing with missed calls from reporters who had somehow tracked his location. The desk clerk, Mrs. Patterson, greeted him with a knowing smile and a stack of messages. Quite a stir you've caused, Mr. Thompson, she said, emphasizing his real name. Haven't seen this much excitement since the tornado of '98. The local news van parked outside Wilson's the next morning was just the beginning. By noon, 3 other news crews had arrived, along with a reporter from a national business magazine and someone claiming to represent a documentary company. Michael found Emma hiding in the restaurant's back office, peeking through blinds at the circus outside. I don't like all these people with cameras, she whispered when he joined her. They keep asking me weird questions about you and our family. What kind of questions? Like if you asked us to say nice things about you, or if we knew you were rich all along and were just pretending. Emma's voice shook with hurt. One lady asked if Mom made me be extra nice to you because she knew you had money. That made me really mad. Michael's jaw tightened. This was exactly what he had feared, the pure story being twisted by cynicism and assumptions. Emma, some people can't believe that kindness exists without hidden motives because they've forgotten how to be genuinely kind themselves. Linda appeared in the doorway looking overwhelmed. Michael, there are people calling the restaurant asking for interviews. Someone offered us $10,000 just to tell the real story of how we met you. What does that even mean? Before Michael could answer, Robert limped in, moving better than he had in months thanks to his new medication. There's a man outside. Says he's from the IRS. wants to discuss our sudden financial windfall." Michael felt his stomach drop. "I'll handle the IRS. That's just standard procedure for large financial transactions. But the media attention..." He looked at the growing crowd. "I'm sorry. I never anticipated it would get this invasive." "It's not your fault," Emma said loyally, but Michael could see the stress on her young face. "You were trying to help us." The situation deteriorated throughout the day. Customers who had been regulars for years suddenly seemed suspicious, studying the Wilson family with calculating eyes. Michael overheard whispered conversations, questioning whether the family's financial troubles had been exaggerated, whether they had somehow manipulated him, whether Emma was too mature for her age in a way that suggested coaching. The worst moment came when Emma served coffee to a table of local women who had known her since birth. "Well, aren't you a little actress?" one of them said with false sweetness. "I bet you practice that sweet smile just for your rich friend." Emma's face crumbled and she fled to the kitchen. Michael found her sobbing behind the industrial dishwasher, her small shoulders shaking with pain no child should experience. "They think I lied," she cried into his shirt. "They think I was pretending to like you just to get money. But I didn't even know you had money when I wrote that note." Michael held her close, anger growing in his chest against the adults who would hurt a child with their cynicism. "Emma, listen to me. The people who matter know the truth. Your parents know, I know. And most importantly, you know who you really are. What if people always think I'm fake now? What if nobody believes I can be nice just because I want to be nice?" It was a question that cut to the heart of Michael's own fears about wealth and authentic relationships. "Then we prove them wrong by continuing to be exactly who we've always been. The right people will see through the noise." But as Michael looked at the media circus surrounding the restaurant, he wondered if he had inadvertently destroyed the very thing he was trying to protect. Emma's innocence was being dissected by strangers who wouldn't recognize genuine kindness if it served them coffee with a smile. That night, sitting alone in his motel room, fielding calls from his corporate team about damage control, Michael realized that his act of generosity had created consequences he had never considered. Money had solved the Wilson family's immediate problems, but it had also painted a target on their backs. And Emma, the pure-hearted child who had changed his life, was now paying the price for his wealth in ways no 7-year-old should have to endure. The question was, how could he protect her from the monster his help had unleashed? 3 days into the media frenzy, Michael discovered that someone had leaked private details about his stay in Willowbrook to a tabloid journalist. The morning newspaper featured a front-page story titled "Billionaire's Secret Small-Town Romance," with a photograph of him and Emma sharing pie on the restaurant's front steps. The headline made his blood run cold, but the implications were far worse. Romance. Romance. Linda Wilson's voice trembled with anger and fear when Michael arrived at the restaurant that morning. "They're implying something sick and wrong about your friendship with my daughter." "How dare they?" Michael looked at the newspaper, his hands shaking with rage. The article suggested that his interest in the Wilson family was somehow inappropriate, painting his generosity as potentially predatory behavior. The journalist had interviewed unnamed sources who questioned his motives for befriending a child and spending extended time in a small town where he had no business interests. "We need to respond to this," he said, pulling out his phone to call his legal team. "No." The voice was Emma's, small but determined. She stood in the restaurant entrance, still wearing her school backpack. "That's what they want. They want us to act scared and guilty like we did something wrong." "Emma, honey, this is different," Linda began, but Emma shook her head. "Mrs. Henderson from the bank called Mom this morning. She said 3 different reporters offered her money to say bad things about you, Michael. When she wouldn't, they offered her money to say bad things about our family too." Emma's young voice carried an anger that didn't belong to a 7-year-old. "They don't care about the truth. They just want a story that sells newspapers." Michael knelt to Emma's level. "This isn't fair to you or your family. Maybe I should leave town until this blows over." "If you leave, they win," Emma said fiercely. They get to say you ran away because you were guilty of something. And Mom, Dad, and I have to live with people thinking we're liars or worse. Before anyone could respond, the restaurant door opened and Richard Chen from the bank entered, his expression grim. But instead of the foreclosure paperwork Michael had expected, Chen carried a different folder. "Mrs. Wilson, I need to discuss a serious matter with you privately," Chen said, looking meaningfully at Michael. "It concerns your recent financial situation." Linda's face paled. "What kind of matter?" Chen hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "The bank has received inquiries from federal investigators about the source of your recent deposit. Large cash transactions are subject to scrutiny under money laundering statutes." He looked directly at Michael. "Mr. Thompson, your charitable donation triggered an automatic investigation that I'm legally obligated to cooperate with." Michael's blood froze. He had anticipated media attention and community gossip, but a federal investigation could destroy the Wilson family, even if they were ultimately cleared of any wrongdoing. Just the legal fees could exceed his original donation. "What does this mean for my family?" Linda asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It means all your accounts are temporarily frozen pending investigation. It means you'll need to provide documentation of every transaction from the past 2 years. It means—" Chen looked at Emma, then chose his words carefully. "It means things are going to get more complicated before they get better." Emma stepped forward, her small hand finding Michael's. "Are we in trouble for accepting help?" "No, sweetheart," Michael said, though his mind was racing through legal implications. "Sometimes when adults try to help each other, other adults have to make sure everything was done properly. It's like when your teacher checks your math homework to make sure you didn't make mistakes." But even as he spoke reassuringly to Emma, Michael knew this was far more serious than homework. Federal investigators didn't care about touching stories or genuine friendships. They cared about patterns, regulations, and potential crimes. That afternoon, 2 FBI agents arrived at the restaurant, their presence turning the media circus into a feeding frenzy. Michael watched from across the street as Emma pressed her face to the window, her small hands clenched into fists as strangers invaded her family's life. His phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. "Emergency board meeting called for tomorrow. Major investors spooked by negative publicity, stock down 8%, recommend immediate return to NYC for damage control." Michael looked at the message. Then at the restaurant where Emma was bravely serving customers while federal agents questioned her parents. His corporate empire was trembling. His reputation was under attack. And his attempt to help a struggling family had potentially made their situation worse. But as he watched Emma maintain her courage, despite everything falling apart around her, Michael realized he had reached a crossroads that would define not just his future, but the kind of man he really was. The question was no longer whether he could afford to stay and fight for the Wilson family. The question was whether he could afford to leave them behind. Michael's world exploded during a phone call that shattered everything he thought he knew about loyalty and friendship. The voice on the other end belonged to Marcus Webb, his assistant and confidant for 8 years, but the words coming through the phone seemed from a stranger. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way, Michael, but the board voted unanimously. Effective immediately, you're being removed as CEO pending investigation into your judgment and mental stability." Marcus's voice carried no emotion whatsoever, no regret. "The Willowbrook situation is being viewed as evidence of a psychological breakdown." Michael gripped the phone so hard, he thought he might break it. "Marcus, what the hell are you talking about? What investigation? The board has concerns about your ability to lead, disappearing for a week to play house with a small-town family, making impulsive charitable donations that triggered federal scrutiny, associating with people who may be exploiting your emotional vulnerability." Marcus paused. "Michael, the board thinks you're having some kind of midlife crisis that's compromising your business judgment. Did you tell them about Emma's family?" Michael's voice was dangerously low. I had to. When FBI agents started calling corporate offices asking questions about your recent activities, I had a fiduciary responsibility to inform the board about potential liability issues. Michael felt the motel room walls closing in around him. So you destroyed a 7-year-old girl's reputation to protect corporate interests. I protected the company that employs 12,000 people from the poor decisions of a man who clearly lost perspective. The Michael Thompson I worked with for 8 years wouldn't have risked everything for a family of strangers. This behavior is erratic and potentially dangerous. The line went dead, leaving Michael staring at his phone in stunned silence. In less than 5 minutes, Marcus had stripped away his life's work, his identity, and his future. The company he had built from nothing, the empire that bore his name, was now in the hands of a board that saw his humanity as a liability. But the betrayal cut deeper than business. Marcus knew about Emma's note, knew about the genuine connection Michael had found with the Wilson family. Marcus had seen him laugh for the first time in years, had witnessed the transformation that genuine friendship had brought to his life. And Marcus had used that vulnerability as a weapon against him. Michael's phone buzzed with notifications, news alerts, social media posts, stock price updates. Within an hour, the business world would know that Michael Thompson had been ousted from his own company. Within a day, the narrative would be set. Disturbed billionaire loses grip on reality, makes questionable decisions, removed for everyone's protection. The media circus around Wilson's would intensify. Emma and her family, already under federal investigation because of his help, would now be painted as the catalysts of his downfall. The pure friendship that had given his life meaning would be twisted into evidence of mental instability. He had to leave. He had to protect the Wilson family from further damage. He had to... A gentle knock interrupted his spiral of panic. Through the thin motel door, he heard Emma's voice. "Michael, are you okay? Mom sent me to check because you looked sad when you left the restaurant." Michael opened the door to find Emma standing in the hallway, her golden curls catching the fluorescent light. She carried a paper plate covered with foil, probably dinner leftovers. "Emma, you shouldn't be here alone. It's not safe with all the reporters around. Mrs. Patterson is watching from the front desk, and Mom knows where I am." Emma studied his face with those perceptive eyes. "You've been crying." Michael hadn't even realized tears were streaming down his face. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just some difficult business news." Emma pushed past him into the room and set the plate on the small table. "Mom says adults always say they're fine when they really aren't. She says it's because they think they have to be strong all the time. But everyone needs help sometimes. Emma, I think I may have made things worse for your family instead of better. The FBI investigation, the media attention, all the problems. Stop." 7-year-old Emma's voice carried surprising authority. "You didn't make those people be mean. You didn't make them tell lies about us. You didn't make them too dumb to see that someone can be nice just because they want to be nice." Michael knelt in front of her, this wise child who had somehow become his anchor in a world gone mad. "But because of my help, your family is under investigation. Your parents are stressed. You're being followed by reporters, and now people are questioning whether our friendship is real or fake." Emma reached out and placed her small palms on either side of his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. "Michael Thompson, you listen to me. Before you came, we were going to lose everything. Dad was getting sicker, Mom was getting sicker, and I was scared every day. Now Dad has medicine that helps. Mom isn't crying every night about money, and I have the best friend I've ever had. But the investigation will prove we didn't do anything wrong because we didn't do anything wrong." Emma's voice was fierce with certainty. "And when it's over, the mean people will have to find someone else to bother, and we'll still be friends." Michael pulled her into a hug, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo and marveling at the strength radiating from someone so small. "How did you get so wise?" "Mom says troubles either make you bitter or make you better. I choose better." Emma pulled back to smile at him. Besides, if you're not okay, who's going to help me practice reading? Looking into Emma's trusting face, Michael realized that Marcus and the board were wrong about one thing. His judgment had never been clearer. He had lost his company, his fortune was under attack, and his reputation was in ruins. But he had found something infinitely more valuable, a friendship worth fighting for, no matter the cost. The emergency board meeting happened via video conference from Michael's cramped motel room, his laptop balanced precariously on the small table, while 12 stern faces stared at him from the screen. Behind him, through the thin walls, he could hear Emma's laughter as she played in the small motel courtyard with some local children who still saw her as just another kid, not a newspaper story. "Michael, we're prepared to offer a settlement," announced Catherine Morrison, board chairman and someone he once considered a friend. "Full severance package, non-compete waiver, and positive references in exchange for your resignation and commitment to avoid additional unconventional behavior that reflects poorly on the company." By unconventional behavior, you mean helping a struggling family. We mean disappearing without notice, making impulsive financial decisions that triggered federal investigations, and associating with individuals who may be exploiting your emotional instability. Morrison's voice carried the cold efficiency of someone cutting losses. "The FBI investigation alone cost us 40 points in stock price." Michael looked around his modest motel room, smaller than his office bathroom in Manhattan, but somehow feeling more like home than anywhere he had lived in years. "What if I refuse? Then we'll pursue legal action for breach of fiduciary duty, emotional distress inflicted on shareholders, and whatever other damages our lawyers can substantiate. We'll also ensure that all major media outlets understand the pattern of erratic behavior that led to your removal." The threat was clear. Accept quiet exile, or they would wage war not just against him, but against the Wilson family's reputation. Emma would be painted as a manipulative child, her parents as opportunistic con artists, and his genuine friendship as an elaborate scam. "I need time to consider your offer," Michael said. "You have until tomorrow morning. After that, our settlement offer expires." Morrison's face disappeared from the screen, followed by the other board members, leaving Michael alone with the blue glow of his laptop and the weight of an impossible choice. His phone rang immediately. "Marcus, I hope you'll be reasonable about this. Accept the settlement, disappear quietly, let everyone move on with their lives." There was no warmth in Marcus's voice, no acknowledgement of their 8-year partnership. "Continuing this charade doesn't help anyone." "Charade?" Michael's voice was barely controlled. "Marcus, you've known me for 8 years. Have you ever seen me happier than I've been these past 2 weeks? I've seen you delusional. There's a difference." Marcus paused. "Michael, these people don't care about you. They care about what you can provide. The moment your money runs out, they'll forget you ever existed." "You're wrong." "Am I?" "Test it. Tell them you've lost everything. See how long that little girl keeps writing notes and bringing pie." The line went dead, leaving Michael with Marcus's poisonous words echoing in his head. But even as doubt crept in, he remembered Emma's fierce defense of their friendship, her mother's genuine gratitude, her father's quiet dignity even in illness. A gentle knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. Linda Wilson stood in the hallway, her face marked by exhaustion, but her eyes determined. "Michael, we need to talk." She entered the room and sat in the only chair, folding her hands tightly. "I know about the board meeting. I know about the settlement offer." "How could you know?" "Small towns have big ears. Mrs. Patterson heard everything through these paper-thin walls." Linda's voice was steady, but Michael could see the cost of her composure. "I'm here to release you from any obligation you feel toward our family." Michael felt his heart sink. "Linda, let me finish." She held up her hand. "The FBI cleared us this afternoon. Turns out the investigation was routine and everything was perfectly legal, but the damage is done. Your company is using us as evidence of your instability. The media is painting my daughter as either victim or manipulator." Linda's voice cracked slightly. "I won't let Emma pay the price for adult games." "What are you saying?" Accept their settlement. Go back to your old life. Let us return to ours." Linda's words came in a rush, as if she had to say them quickly before losing courage. "We'll always be grateful for what you did, but we can't be the reason you lose everything you worked for. Linda, that company, that life, none of it mattered until I met your family. But it's your life, Michael. These few weeks in Willowbrook have been wonderful, but they're not reality. Reality is board meetings and corporate responsibility and a world that needs your leadership." Linda stood to leave. Emma doesn't understand adult complications. She thinks friendship conquers everything, but we know better. After Linda left, Michael sat alone in his motel room as the sun set over Willowbrook. Through his window, he could see Wilson's, its warm lights glowing against the approaching darkness. Emma was probably inside, helping with the dinner crowd, still believing that kindness and loyalty could overcome any obstacle. His laptop beeped with an email from his legal team. "Settlement documents attached. Requires signature by 9 a.m. Eastern tomorrow." Michael opened the documents and read through pages of legal language that would restore his fortune, protect his reputation, and send him back to a life of boardrooms and calculated relationships. All it would cost was the most genuine friendship he had ever known. As he sat there with the pen in his hand, Michael Thompson faced the choice that would define not just his future, but his soul. Comfort and security in the world that had made him rich, or uncertainty and struggle in the world that had made him human. Outside, Emma's laughter echoed through the small-town streets, and Michael realized that some decisions can't be measured in dollars and cents. They can only be measured in what a man is willing to sacrifice for love. Michael stared at the settlement documents spread across his motel room table, his pen hovering over the signature line that would restore his old life and erase the complications of the past 2 weeks. The documents promised financial security, corporate power, and a return to the carefully controlled world he had known before meeting Emma Wilson. But as he lifted the pen to sign, a small piece of paper fluttered to the floor. Emma's original note, still tucked between the legal documents where he had placed it for strength. He bent to retrieve it, reading her childish handwriting once more. "Thank you for being kind to me today. Most adults don't really see me. You looked at me like I mattered. That made my heart happy." The words hit him like lightning, illuminating a truth he had been too blind to see. Michael Thompson tore the settlement documents in half. 20 minutes later, he knocked on the Wilsons' front door, his heart pounding with the certainty of someone who had finally found his true north. Linda opened the door with red-rimmed eyes, clearly having spent the night crying over the impossible situation they all faced. "Michael, I told you." "Linda, I need you and your family to hear something important." His voice carried a conviction that made her step aside. "All of you, including Emma." Robert shuffled from the kitchen, leaning on his walker but moving more steadily than Michael had ever seen. Emma appeared from the hallway in pajamas, rubbing sleepy eyes, but instantly alert when she saw Michael's expression. "I just made a decision that some people would call the stupidest choice in business history," Michael announced, holding up the torn settlement documents. "I refused my company's offer to buy my silence and restore my fortune." "Michael, no," Linda breathed. "You can't throw your life away for us." "I'm not throwing it away. I'm choosing what kind of life I really want to live." Michael knelt in front of Emma, taking her small hands in his. "Emma, do you remember what you wrote in your note about how I looked at you like you mattered?" Emma nodded solemnly. "Well, you and your parents looked at me like I mattered too. Not my money, not my success, just me. And that's worth more than any company or bank account." Michael's voice grew stronger with each word. "I'd rather be poor with friends who love me than rich with people who only care about what I can give them." "But what will you do?" Robert asked, his words clearer than usual. "How will you live?" Michael smiled, feeling lighter than he had in years. "I'll start over. Maybe open a small business here in Willowbrook. Maybe learn what it's like to build something meaningful instead of just profitable." He looked around the modest living room that had become more precious to him than any boardroom. "And I'll be the friend to Emma that she was to me." Emma threw herself into his arms with a cry of joy that echoed through the small house. "You're staying? Really staying? Really staying? If you'll have me." But the next morning brought a shock no one had anticipated. Michael's phone rang at dawn with a call from an unexpected source, Mrs. Henderson from the bank. "Mr. Thompson, you need to come here immediately. Something extraordinary is happening." At the bank, Michael found a line of people stretching around the block. Business owners, farmers, teachers, retirees. The entire population of Willowbrook seemed to be gathered outside the modest building. Mrs. Henderson met him at the door, her elderly face radiant with excitement. "Word spread about what you chose to give up for the Wilson family," she said, leading him inside. "People started talking about what real friendship means, what community means, and then..." She gestured to a pile of checks and cash on her desk. "They started donating." Michael looked at the money in confusion. "Donating to what? To you?" Mrs. Henderson's voice cracked with emotion. "Every person in this town who's ever been helped by the Wilson family, and honey, that's pretty much everyone, decided to return the favor. They're pooling resources to help you start a new life here." Emma and her parents arrived as the crowd outside began applauding. Through the bank windows, Michael could see people holding homemade signs. "Thank you for choosing love. Real friends are priceless." And "Welcome home, Michael." "I don't understand," Linda whispered, tears streaming down her face. Mrs. Patterson from the motel pushed through the crowd with an announcement that left everyone stunned. The local paper just got a call from 60 Minutes. But they want to do a story about what happens when someone chooses humanity over profit. They're calling it the Willowbrook Miracle. But the biggest surprise came when Emma tugged Michael's sleeve and pointed down the street. A familiar figure was walking toward the bank, Marcus, looking disheveled and uncertain. "I saw the news coverage," Marcus said when he reached them, his voice barely audible above the crowd's excitement. "I saw what you chose to give up, and I realized..." He paused, struggling with the words. "Michael, in 8 years of working together, I never saw you smile the way you've been smiling in these news reports." "Marcus, let me finish. The board was wrong. I was wrong. You didn't lose your mind in Willowbrook. You found your heart." Marcus reached into his briefcase and pulled out official documents. "I convinced 3 major investors to break with the board. We're prepared to back your new venture, whatever it is, with full creative and operational control." Michael shook his head slowly. "Marcus, I appreciate the gesture, but I don't want my old life back. That's not what I'm offering. I'm offering to help you build a new one." Marcus looked around at the crowd of ordinary people who had rallied behind Michael's choice. "Whatever you want to create here in this place that taught you what really matters, we want to be part of it." Now, as Michael stood in the middle of Willowbrook's main street, surrounded by people who had chosen to see the best in him, holding Emma's hand, with her parents beaming with pride, he realized that his greatest fear had been backwards all along. He had worried that people only loved him for his money, but the truth was more beautiful. When he chose love over money, true love found him. 6 months later, Michael Thompson, now co-owner of Wilson's and founder of the Willowbrook Community Development Fund, was watching Emma serve coffee to customers with the same radiant smile that had changed his life. The restaurant was busier than ever, filled with visitors who had heard the story and wanted to experience the place where a billionaire had chosen friendship over fortune. But every morning before the crowds arrived, Michael and Emma still shared a piece of apple pie on the front steps and talked about dreams, kindness, and the magical truth that life's greatest treasures cannot be bought. They can only be given freely, received with gratitude, and cherished forever. Emma's note still lived in Michael's wallet, but now it was accompanied by dozens of others from people whose lives had been touched by his story. Each one reminded him of the same beautiful truth. When you look at someone like they matter, they look back at you the same way. And that, Michael Thompson had learned, was the only wealth that truly mattered. Did you enjoy this touching story? If it moved you as much as it did me, give it a like. Subscribe to the channel for more heart-touching stories. Hit the bell to never miss one. Tell me in the comments, do you believe love transcends death? Have you ever had an unexplainable experience with deceased loved ones? I want to hear your stories. And don't forget to share this video with that special person who needs to believe in miracles and second chances. Until the next story, a heartfelt hug.